But so you guys kind of got in, I would say, right place, right time, right ambition, right knowledge. Like it was just like it was a perfect storm of independent worlds kind of taking a step away from like the college age kids wanting to compete in PASIC, and it's kind of merging into WGI, and you guys are like hitting this at the money point. Um, Similar to what it was talking about, like those Great Depression people you mentioned, like if you were too old, you were already settled in a job, and if you're too young, you just didn't quite have the knowledge to start out. So that was really a sweet spot, and I think that if there were some of those other groups that probably like Black Knights or something that were still around, they'd probably be at the top just because of when that all happened. Um, were they out of Colorado too, though? Black Knights?
No, they were out of
No.
California, and I'm pretty sure that Mike Jackson actually did that line.
Okay, okay. Well, that would make sense.
And K-Shaw was in that line. I'm 90% sure that K-Shaw played snare drum in the Black Knights the year that they were. I think they were like second and second or tied. They tied with somebody. It was the X
Okay,
year. It was the
okay.
what? It was like their one really knockout year. Pretty sure that Mike taught and that Kevin Shaw was in that actual snare line. You can fact
Nice.
check me afterwards.
Well, yeah. Well, somebody fact check us. I'll have to reach out to Kevin. I guess over the years too, with all of your collection of knowledge and trials and tribulations and failures, it would certainly allow you in the design process to preemptively, I guess, eliminate things that you just know, like, this is something we probably can do. This is something we can try, and we probably have a certain amount of weeks to really give it a shot before we exit. What's that like? And I know that we have firsthand experience with the design process, even though it's probably changed since then. But when you guys are sitting down to design a show for Rhythm X or this year, and I think Josh alluded on another podcast that it kind of started with the music maybe more this year. What
Yeah,
are
it
you guys
depends.
like? What are you guys like driving home? Like, all right, here's the start. How do we get from this? We have this idea. Like, connect the dots.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of great quotes about the design process. I think it was Michelangelo was talking about David, and that he just kept chipping away at the marble until the angel appeared. Things like that, where we often bite off a big chunk of something, whether it's a concept like the show this year. Actually, um, if you want to know, you want me to get nitty gritty a little bit?
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So it started during COVID with I wanted some way to change the way the floor looked in a second. So I wanted to change the color of the floor and just like right away, but would not use TVs or lights, right? I think that's lame. Um, so I found it was like full in like lockdown mode at Lowe's, these retractable sunshades. They were like 8 foot by 4 foot, but they were like $95. And for some reason, they were like clearanced out at like $14. So I like drove to every Lowe's within 100 miles and bought as many of them as I could. Didn't know what I was going to use them for yet. Didn't even know if there would ever be a Rhythm X again at this point because everything was shut down. But those retractable blinds and being able to change what the floor looked like, that was the first part of the show. And then we put it in a box, which was based on New York. Like if you're in New York on Broadway and you're training to be a trained actor, you often do a thing called black box theater, which is just you in a very small room with a very small audience, and it's black behind you, and they call it black box theater. So the shadow boxes of being able to retract and put curtains in front of it where the magic of seeing people leave the floor, like if we've got a whole bunch of these boxes that you could go in, but what comes out of the curtain is something different, was something that I was really inspired by. um, and then the Nirvana came later, uh, and then we kind of melded those two ideas together. And Andrew found a bunch of really cool music. Obviously didn't get quite enough credit in some of the captions for the cool music that there was because we also played some rock tunes, which is against the rules. But I think that the Nirvana stuff and then getting into Kurt Cobain and his life and all the paintings and all that stuff, that was when the show really took, it came to life.
Rhythm X, the Legends of Rock. Um, yeah, I think a lot of the nuance of shows it would get lost on a casual fan for sure, unless you just sit and watch the show multiple times in a row, which I think is the goal when you're designing a show, is that you do have a show that, one, serves the purpose of a great read on the first run, and two, is something that people want to go back and listen to. And there's a few of the shows this year, obviously Rhythm X being one, that I just still find myself, here we are now. Like, you just come back to it, and obviously it's a Nirvana song, but if you hear that on the radio now, I have this different association of the song.
Yeah,
That
and
I
that
have
lyric especially is a
yeah,
Rhythm X kind of it's our question to the audience and to the judges, because we're in a competitive activity, but we're also trying to create this piece of art using percussion and using people. So, like, do you want to just be entertaining? Do you just want to be musical? Like, if you gave the audience what they wanted, there would be people in big spinning drum machine things that roll all over the floor the whole time, and a trapeze artist and all kinds of shit that would be very entertaining, but it wouldn't necessarily get the points. So just like Kurt Cobain struggled with, I know that the audience wants me to play these two chords over and over again, but I feel like I could do a lot more than that. Um, I think a lot of groups struggle with the balance between being the people's champion. Like, is this the show that is going to make a kid want to be an indoor drumline, or is this the show that's engineered to get the most points? So in Rhythm X, generally, I think if you look historically, the only times where we've really missed is when we've tried to really engineer and make sure we get points, because then we kind of lose our identity a little bit. And I made a Facebook post about this after WGI, because I have probably 6 or 7 second place shows.
second place shows. I saw that
my
list.
favorite. Yeah, like, you're gonna tell me that Inspired and All the World's a Stage and In Perspective and Art Shaped Box, like, they didn't win? Okay, that's cool. But I know the number of people that have come up to me and said, like, yo, that changed my life, or I wanted to do drumline because I saw that show. I'd always rather be that group.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, 100%. And there was one thing too. I always remember this quote that you said. I don't remember what year it was in the 3 years that I was there, but you always told us, like, I will not make you wear something that I wouldn't wear myself. And that sort of introspection just like, all right, it created a pretty good level of trust with, like, they're thinking about how we're going to feel when we're out there. And I'm sure, like, if
Yeah.
I went down the moment of the opening moment of the show where the snares, like, the curtain comes up and they're just there and there's the head nod, like, I would envision myself, like, that's something, like, I would want to do. Like, I would want to experience that from a performer's vantage point. Like, the curtain comes up, you just give that, like, subtle, like, kind of smirk to the audience, and the crowd just loses their shit.
Yeah, that's always been our plan. And Tim and Andrew and I have been together for a long time now, friends for a long time at Rhythm X, but as a design team since '08. And our theories are that we're not trying to win, we're trying to be the best thing that's ever been. If we're the best thing that's ever been, it may or it may not win, but that's the goal first, right? And then whatever, we're doing this to provide an opportunity for the students, for the cast, for the members, that we can't do, right? There's an age out rule for good reasons, and we can't do this activity anymore. So why would we want to provide something for the students that isn't fucking cool? Like, we want them to get the experience of seeing that crowd on their feet, and that's how we design. So I know a lot of groups will bring in, like I said, like, bring in the dance person, and Tim and I are like, would you want to take your drum off and dance for a minute and a half of the show? We're like, no. So we'll do something cooler or different, or I don't know. Everybody's got their own style and their own influences, but we like to really care about what the members actually want to do and get to do by coming to Rhythm X. that also then means that we get better players because their friends are like, yo, at Rhythm X, it's really cool there, and they don't make us do stupid shit.
It's funny you bring up.
All right, yeah.
It's funny you bring up taking the drums off and doing basically dance work for a minute and a half of your show, because Evan and I harped on this as we did reaction videos, as we watched all the shows come out this season. At one point, him and I were I think we were watching a regional at his house, and we just looked at each other and went, is this just a thing now that every group has to all put their drums down and do a bunch of guard body work, basically, for like a minute of the show? It's like that. It doesn't work out well usually because we don't have the dance training that all these guard members have to make it look really good, and you can't give us the training in a few weekends leading up to the shows. Like, it's just, we don't have the body control. We haven't been doing it since we're 14 years old, 13 years old, and it just seems forced, and it's just something that really stuck out to both of us. It was just ironic that you brought that up.
And it's true. And the reason that happens is because there's a couple of really good groups that have done that at a very high level, and groups that are below that look at it and see, oh, well, this group is getting really good scores in visual, and they took their drums off and danced for a long time. So we should or must have to do that also.
Yeah, and I think there's a big difference too. Like, I know for sure there's a couple groups out there with people on staff that are like legit dancers. Like, that's what they do. They teach dance. They have dance studios. So they understand that. And I think there's a big gap between that and just bringing in someone who's good at color guard. Even though, like, you can satisfy that, it's not quite the same. Like, there's a different level of training and nuance behind that. But one thing you mentioned just a second ago, too, is, like, it allows you to get better performers doing things like that want to do. And obviously, the groups that have been around for a long time, and Broken City is kind of an anomaly, and Pulse is new to the game, but California is just littered with, obviously, talent, and those dudes know what they're doing out there. But RCC, MCM, you guys were able to enter into this game and establish yourself and take a lot of risks and ultimately figure out a lot of things. And now we're continuously successful over and over and over and over again. And I think one of the challenges for a group that's trying to break into that top 5 is that they just, across the spectrum, like, they might have a really, really great section, but across the entire ensemble, they're probably just not drawing the same talent. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, Blue Devils are drawing talent every year. It is what it is. Santa Clara Vane.
I have another theory about that.
Okay.
You want to hear another theory?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So this is about, I don't know if you guys ever watched Formula One.
Mm-hmm. I do watch a lot of Formula One. One of my bucket lists is to go to a Formula One race at, like, Monaco or Spa or something like that.
All right, well, let me know because I'll go too.
It's actually cheaper than going to a race here in the States.
Really?
Yeah, you can get a 3-day pass at Monaco for $1,500, room included.
All right, well, let's do that after this podcast. I had never really been interested into it until a couple years ago. The Netflix special came out, and the fact that they have 20 cars, 10 teams, right? And the drivers are a differentiator, right? But one of the things that they said in one of the episodes that really struck with me was that, like, well, Mercedes has a better car. Mercedes' car is just a better car. And so Lewis Hamilton's going to be up near the top no matter what because their car is better. And they have a better design team, they have better engineers, they've got a better pit crew, all those things. But if your car is just flat out better than the Haas team or McLaren or whoever, there'll be some variation, but you're eventually going to rise to the top. And that's how I feel that the top 5 is. Like, if I had to say what Pulse's talent is, or Broken City, Rhythm X, their talent level, it's a Ferrari, it's a McLaren, it's a Mercedes, right? And so when we're given the best car, which I wouldn't say we're given it, we recruit our asses off to make sure that we have the best car. But when your kids can do the hardest stuff in the world as designers, you don't have to bash your head about, like, well, I want to do this thing, but the kids aren't going to be able to do it. So that's one of the biggest things. People will be like, well, why aren't people breaking into that? It's like, well, you got to get a better car.
Clarity.
And when you have a better car, it's easier to recruit the better drivers. It just is what it is. Like, people who are in Williams and Haas and AlphaTauri and stuff, they want to move up the ladder. So they're like, all right, who has proven success and is going to give me the best opportunity to compete at the highest level? It's like, well, it's these teams. So I'm going to go try out. I'm going to put my name in the hat. And
AlphaTauri is an interesting one. Isn't that Red Bull's second team?
Yeah, it's basically their feeder their feeder team.
So that's Powell, right? Like, Powell's not going to beat Hulk.
No, they try out the same place, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, AlphaTauri is using the Honda engines for the same thing Red Bull's using. And so, like, if Pierre Gasly is having, like, a great year, they're like, we're going to look at him and bumping him up to the A team.
And I would add on to that these top 5 groups that usually have the highest level of clarity every year, it's like you guys can also afford to, a little bit at the top, to take more risks. Because even if you miss a little bit, your clarity, the Drum Corps Coffee Shop guys were just asking us about this. Your clarity is still going to be higher because the car is just better than the other groups. Even if your show design risks miss a little bit, you're still going to finish well in the top 5 because you're performing just that much better still. And every time I'm watching a regional, it's the same thing. It gets to the first group, and it's usually in that top 5, and it's a marked sound difference. The members move across the floor better. The battery blend is better. The front ensemble blend is better. Just the front to back, the connection between the front and the back. Like, it's just a marked jump up every time you go from the group in 6th right to 5th. Now, there's a couple that are pushing a little bit to break into it, but even now, it's still just a separation that...
I mean,
go ahead.
That experience from a membership standpoint, too, feeds directly into the sheets. Like, I started studying the judges' sheets after recent conversations and stuff that happened. But, like, on the visual program, it talks about presence. Well, when you're standing out at UD Arena in finals and you have 40 kids in the ensemble who've all competed in drum corps and done indoor before, like, the presence and the confidence that those kids are able to exude is just going to be different. Like, you're going to feel it. There's no way around it. The accuracy of movement. Like, I was just highlighting these words, the range of content, like, that's on the composition thing. Like, what you were talking about as designers, it doesn't pigeonhole you because your range of content, you can pretty much throw the kitchen sink at them and see what happens.
Yep. Yeah, and with, like, the Formula One thing, the people know the owners, they know the drivers, they know the, like, team coaches or whatever. Same thing happens in WGI. I mean, it's not like the judges don't know who the people are at these top groups. And this is where it's a little unfair. We've paid our dues over the years to get to the point where you've got some credit in the bank. But if you're at the second regional and your closer's a little jacked, or the curtains aren't opening right, or a transition's a little bit messy, the response that I get is like, I know that you guys will figure that out. I'm not even worried about that. Where another group who's maybe a 12th place group, they might just get railed for that same thing because that judge doesn't have the confidence that they will figure it out. We've had enough years of, like, last couple weeks of the season, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, and making sure everything's exactly right, where the judge goes, oh yeah, well, they tend to figure it out, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
I think that's valid, though.
It is.
When a judge knows, like, all right, your track record is proven, versus somebody who's, like, maybe a newer ensemble that's just breaking into the game, it would almost be a disservice if they didn't tell them the things that they were thinking. Like, if they assumed that they knew it, like, maybe they assumed that you guys or MCM know, like, that's probably not fair to assume that they know. Yep. Like, oh, you guys will figure it out. And on the tape, they might be like, figure what out? What are you talking about? Like, what's he talking about? Figure what out? Like, that information is probably more, I would say, receptive. At least that's how I would take it. But
are you saying the judge will not knock like say X for example, as much with the number they give you? Like they won't dog the number as much, or are you saying like just like with the feedback they verbally give the staff?
I'm saying that across the board in most pageantry organizations, that if you've got the track record of success at the end of the season, that they're not going to be as worried about a detail in your show that might not be figured out, because they're going to trust that you'll figure it out because you've proven over time that you do that. I don't think that's fair necessarily, but we've spent many years of building that trust and that credit up.
Yeah, I understand that. That's what you said, the word fair for a second. That, like, to me, because my brain immediately goes to kind of, well, is that really fair? Because if you're still getting a higher score because they're not docking your score as much because they know you'll figure it out 3 weeks from now, shouldn't they dock both groups equally, I guess? Now, granted, X's score is probably still going to be higher than Group Y because the playing is probably going to be better, whatever. But I would hope it's set up in a way that they would still do the same thing with the numbers and how much they dock you for that, regardless of what the group is.
Yeah, well, just to be fair, nobody's docking anybody because it's a build-up system.
That's fair. Fair. Okay, that's a good point. Good point.
Yeah, I have a thought I'll share later, but I think that makes sense too. And I would say most judges, especially because they know everybody, like, yeah, it may seem like bias towards one group, but like the relationship that they have with this staff, they probably also have with like 12 other staffs because they worked with them or taught them or know half the kids in the ensemble, or, oh, that kid marched with me this summer and this kid in this group marched with me that summer. So it's becoming more and more prevalent, I would say, across the board.
It is. And you that like name recognition that the top groups get, you've earned it for sure. And it's not really any different than if a movie comes out and it's like, oh, directed by Steven Spielberg and it's starring Scarlett Johansson and Tom Hanks. You're going to be like, yeah, I'm probably going to like that.
Yeah.
That's bias. You can't, I mean, we asked the judges to not be biased, but we've given them 20 years of history to say, yo, when Rhythm X comes out, we're going to bring it. And if you don't acknowledge that, then you're not human.
Yeah, and it's not like you guys are going to go into critique and be like, you guys should probably judge us harder. Like, nobody's going to say that. Nobody's going to say that. Nobody's going into critique saying that. So, yeah, it takes longevity. It takes consistency, and those things are hard.
Yep.
It just is what it is.
Yep.
I guess, too, I brought up a couple moments or a couple instances of referencing these sheets and stuff. There are some things on here that I found interesting just when looking through them, and you've had a hand in organizing these. At least input I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Things like music composition, it says like variety, continuity, clarity of intent, orchestration, but it says range of content, which I felt like was an interesting choice of words, because range of content does not necessarily mean difficulty of content by any means. So is that correct? I guess like an intentional, like, we're not really going to talk about difficulty. We're just going to talk about skill sets.
Well, I can tell you, I've been on the steering committee for a number of years now and had so many conversations about the sheets when we rewrote all of them over the last 6 or 8 years. Each caption got completely rehauled or overhauled. And the amount of wordsmithing and nuance and like, we would fight over one, like, does this say range of content or does it say range of difficulty? And we would go back and forth trying to make sure that every group can get a fair chance to be successful on all of the sheets. And to not, that's also the reason there's not a battery judge and a pit judge, right? That's been brought up before. Like, why don't we have one judge doing the battery and one judge doing the pit? But if you do that, now you've got 2 judges and you've got 2 staff groups that are all trying to get the most points. So the battery's never going to want to stop playing and the pit's never going to want to stop playing. And now our product is not as good because we're not creating as good of music. So every single word on those sheets, Caleb and Chris and Mark do just an incredible job on the admin team But this
Art
and
Thurston,
not but
Caleb Roth,
yeah,
and Chris Heston, right?
Rothy, yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Rothy, sorry.
they're the best in the business by far. And well, I guess they're the only ones in the business of WGI, but they're all just amazing dudes and very, very smart, thoughtful. I know that like Mark has been in the leadership role since I started in '97. I think was his first year also as like the head of the percussion division, and he is very good at making sure that the kids are first, that it doesn't turn into something that's about the designers, but it's about the kids' experience. Chris Heston has done a wonderful job over the last, whatever, 8 or 10 years of kind of revamping the judging roster. And we can get into judging a little bit if you want to, but I think that he's really put much more qualified people, without to disparage the early judges because they were there for their own reasons, but really putting qualified people in the seat in as many captions as possible. I would put WGI's roster up really, I mean, against anybody. They're great.
Yeah, I mean, I've said on several occasions, I think anytime I talk about judging, my number one disclaimer is that I do not envy the job that those folks have to do. I get the benefit of watching a group on rewind or replay. Go back, watch it, listen to it. Go back, watch and listen to it. The ability to take a read live and try to get it right and catch everything that the designers want you to catch and reward everything that they want you to reward is very difficult. So every time I talk about judging, I feel like it's through that lens. Like, yeah, yep. Super hard job.
And the lens of the overall roster and especially the philosophy. I mean, the philosophy that on a given night they can change their mind. One group might win one night, the next group they might go down 2 places. I've always been a big fan of that. In the early days, my wife is the color guard director at Centerville, and I was the percussion director at Centerville. And the two of us, I remember I would be behind the curtain talking to the kids, like, okay, you're about to go out there. If you throw down, you could move up 3 spots. And it happens sometimes. Also, we shit the bed a couple times and went down 2 or 3 spots. And she was behind the curtain telling her students, listen, she would say that, but they would never move, right? Never. I mean, one place maybe, but the number of shows that I've seen that are like world champions that have 5 or 6 drops in them, it's like it's been decided. And then I'm involved in the company itself, so I don't want to disparage the color guard community. I think that the percussion community specifically has it really figured out about letting that judge the show. And I've been the recipient of the anomalies sometimes. Like in 2005, the In Perspective show, Mark Thurston talks about this to me every time he sees me, basically. But we got a 40 in GE. Like we maxed that out. We were first in visual. And then one of the music judges, had us third, which is, I think, about where we should have been. And then one of them had us ninth. And we lost the show by like 2/10. So we should have won the show flat out. And this guy, I won't mention his name. It's pretty easy to find out online. But I wasn't happy about that. But I would rather have him be able to make that decision, as wrong as I think it might have been, and have my group get second place than have that guy being in the van on the way to the show going, oh, well, what do you think about Centerville? Yeah, about third, don't you think? And then both music judges have us third and nothing changes. I'd rather have that person have the freedom to make a decision, even if sometimes it sucks.
Yeah, I think the verbiage I hear that's tossed around is they call it show of the night.
I was going to say
the show of the night.
Mike Jackson said that a lot in 2012 on tour. I know, like, he was big with us in 2012 about, obviously, DCI averages the 3 nights for drums, color guard, all that stuff. I've never been a huge fan of that for the reasons that you just said. Like, if the group that throws down can jump up 2 spots in percussion, and if the one that won the last 2 nights craps the bed, like, I'm torn a little bit about it, because it's like, well...
Yeah, but the caption awards and that don't really weigh into the placement on finals night.
I mean, drum scores impact the core score, don't they? They're part of it. It's a small fraction, but it's part of it.
But who wins that award doesn't matter on finals night.
No, I know. I know, but it's just show of the night, Mike Jackson, a person in that group. You're talking about that concept.
I think if you're going to average the 3 nights, then you should average the whole season.
Ooh, interesting.
I also don't think you should average the 3 nights. So
there you go.
I like the 3-night average personally. To me, it feels more like an NBA Finals / MLB World Series. But
would you do that at WGI though? Like if that's the case, Rhythm X doesn't get second place on finals night, we get third.
But that would be more like who won the music caption over all 3 nights, overall music award.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
there's a
different.
reason we don't give those as well.
Yeah,
like they're all included into the overall score, and that's what it should be. It's like
so you think DCI should get rid of the caption?
No, not necessarily. I just don't think WGI should add them.
Fair.
I think
I agree with that.
No, yeah,
I don't want WGI.
I've never been a fan of the average for DCI.
I feel like then, overall best visual. I don't know, weird, interesting.